So feathers are what enable birds to fly. Originally, they were probably only used for keeping them warm. They happen to be lightweight, but they're pretty strong. If you've ever seen a feather that's fallen off of a bird, you can try to bend it and it'll go back into shape. The surface of the feather is made up of tightly spaced, overlapping filaments that hook together. And then the overlapping feathers form the wings which allow the birds to fly. So they form a sheet that pushes against the air as the wings move or push against the air. Feathers are made of keratin. We've seen keratin before in the outer coverings on the shells of Testudines, order Testudines. We've also seen that in the scales of reptiles. Keratin is found also in hair, nails, claws, and scales. So your fingernails, your hair, facial hair, head hair, all has keratin in it. Feathers. There's two categories of feathers. We talked about some different specific feathers, but plumaceous feathers are the ones that are downy and give insulation. So those down feathers. Pennaceous are linked veined feathers that are used for wing and contour feathers. I think the root for penne, it means like flags, like a pennant. Plume is like a plume that sticks up. So plumaceous, sticking up, feathery, and pennaceous, more like a flag, I think. Vein of a typical feather consists of a hidden downy rod, base, I should say, for insulation, so there's a little tuft of down at the bottom, and an exposed outer portion that sticks up to the outer part of the skin. And that is used to streamline. So here are some feathers. Downy feather up the top. You can kind of see the floofy bits. Those all kind of trap air and make good insulation. You can see on the right the hard shaft attached to the quill, which is the part that attaches to the bird. The vein is the feathery parts that stick out of that. And you can see that there are barbs, little pieces that stick out from the shaft of the feather, and then barbules are the pieces that stick out between them, and they all kind of zip together and interlock to make a fairly rigid surface on the feather. So feathers have an aftershaft. That's the downy part that's at the bottom. The aftershaft functions to increase insulation. So no matter what kind of feather we're talking about, there is that little downy portion at the bottom. Whether it's just a pure downy feather or even a body contour feather, it will still have that downy part at the bottom to keep insulation. Other adaptations for flight. In general, the skeleton has been lightened and shortened for flight. They've achieved this by eliminating some structures and modifying others. Probably the biggest component of lightening the skeleton is that the bones of a bird are hollow. Feathered wing to give that lift surface. Mass reduction. The wrist bones are now reduced to 2 bones instead of all the bones that we have in our wrist and our other tetrapod relatives have. Bones are hollow and supported by internal struts or spongy bone. Important to note that bird bones being hollow make them really bad to feed to your pets. So if you're ever eating something and dogs love to chew on bones, don't ever get them bird bones. Chicken bones can be really bad. Particularly cooked bones in general are bad for a lot of species, but the hollow bones will shatter, and those sharp shards of bone can actually cause intestinal damage as it goes through the dog's body if they eat them. Other adaptations for flight, losing that long tail. Why do you need a tail to fly? Instead, the tail bones are reduced and fused into that pygostyle to allow the tail feathers to support and adjust for flight. Losing teeth. They don't need teeth. Their beak allows them to eat well enough. The skull and bill are light but strong. Here's an example of what the hollow bones look like. You can see that it's kind of like a hollow cavity all the way through the bone, and there's these little struts that move around to give support. It reduces the mass of the bird, less weight, less energy to fly. You can see a human long bone in the top picture, and you can see the same corresponding bone in an eagle, and it's basically full of air, making it easier to get them off the ground. The skeleton is strengthened. Ribs are rear-facing, and they overlap and strengthen the walls of the thorax, the abdomen. Bones of the wrist and the pelvis are fused together, so reduced bones again. The sternum or breastbone is enlarged, like that sternal keel that allows breast muscles, the pectoral muscles, to have big attachment spots. Fused hand bones support and maneuver primary flight feathers, so the ones that are extended out at the ends of their wings, allows them to maneuver around a little bit, those alula feathers. Efficient lungs and a powerful four-chambered heart power their flight. So again, a four-chambered heart, like we saw in the crocodilians, we see that in birds, we see that in many mammals. Here is a pigeon skeleton as a sample of that. You can see the pygostyle, the sternal keel again. Remember the humerus, radius, and ulna. Now this is the wrist. The wrist is now just two bones, and then you've got some digits, three digits. It's digit 2, 3, and 4, so missing the pinky and the thumb. Further skeletal modifications, the furcula, the wishbone, that's the clavicles we talked about that are fused to form one structure. That furcula flex during flight and spreads and contracts every time they beat their wings. So as they're moving their breast muscles in and out, it's actually allowing them to compress and expand their lungs. They have what are called air sacs, pockets of air that they store in their body as they're respiring or breathing. And then by flexing those muscles, they're actually pushing air through their body. There's the furcula. Further skeletal modifications for flight, arms and fingers. The wing is supported by the arm and finger bones. So my arm extends out like this. This part of the bird's wing is actually kind of tucked into the body, and the wing extends out with the radius and the ulna, the wrist, and the finger bones where the feathers are attached at the end. So they don't typically extend their wing out like this. Their wing is extended out like this during flight. Primary feathers attached to wrist and finger bones, secondary feathers attached to the radius and ulna. And you can see here radius, ulna, wrist, finger bones sticking out here, and the feathers kind of fan out. Good example of a bird in flight, a raptorial bird. Legs, joints, and bones. When you look at the bird's knee, what appears to be the knee is actually the ankle. So a little bit backwards are not quite what you would expect to see. The adaptations of the feet can show what the bird eats. So this long bone is actually kind of tucked inside the body. It's the femur. And then the femur is the top part of your leg, and then this is the bottom of your leg, the tibia and fibula, running from the knee down. And then what bends is kind of looking like a backwards knee is actually the ankle. And then this is kind of like the foot, and then the toes stick out from the end of the foot. So what can you tell about beaks and feet? Well, you can look at a webbed-toed bird. Oh, that probably is a swimming bird. Or if it has lobes, maybe swimming or walking, it gives more resistance when pushing against the water. If they have toes that are forward-facing, maybe walking. If they have a toe that's reversed in the back, maybe they are perching. They can grab onto a single branch. If they have 4 talons, wicked sharp talons, probably for seizing prey. If they have 2 on the front, 2 on the back, probably good for climbing. A lot of the owls have toe structures like this. If they have a beak, like a duck's beak, a bill, that's good for filtering out, sifting things out of the water. They have a long pointed beak for probing. A small one with tufts of hair around the beak, good for catching insects. A chisel-like beak for cracking seeds. One that's hooked, like we saw with the eagle, good for tearing and strips of meat. Or woodpecker's nice, hard, chisel-like beak is good for drilling holes in wood. All right, so perching. Being able to perch in trees was an early avian adaptation. So maybe there's some linkage to this and that idea of tree-down evolution of flight. But perching in the trees allows you to get away from predators. It allows you to look for your prey. The largest group of birds is the passerines, the perching birds. They have 4 moderately long toes, 3 face forward, 1 facing back. The tendons on the toes lock the foot in a firm grip. So basically they attach to a branch. They can go to sleep. They won't fall off the branch because their toes lock in place holding them there. Here is a perching song thrush, and you can see 3 toes facing forwards. Hard to see, but there's a toe in the back holding them on that branch. Hopping and walking. Many passerines hop. They can't walk because their toes are designed, evolved to hold onto a branch. They have difficulty walking around. So you'll see a lot of the perching birds, passerines, hopping around. If you see them early in the morning going out to hunt insects in your yard or something like that, you'll see them kind of hopping around in the grass. Starlings and larks are exceptions to that. In many other groups of ground-dwelling birds, the chickens, walking is used as their primary means of moving around. There are some wild relatives of the chicken that have more flight ability than modern domesticated chickens. Birds specialized in running. So ostriches only run on 2 toes. Rheas use 3 at the end of their foot. So kind of interesting that they have evolved to using less toes to move really fast on land and have lost the ability of flight. Climbing birds, woodpeckers, nuthatches, tree creepers, wood creepers, they're able to climb up and down tree trunks. They can hook into and around pieces of bark. The feet in all cases are strong, toes are well curved, the tail is used as a brace to prop their body against the trunk. So you don't think about this if you're standing on the ground, but if you're perched on the side of a tree like this, you don't want your body extended out because it's harder to hold yourself up. So what you see is these climbing birds will kind of pull themselves in nice and compact to the tree, and they use their tail at the back to keep their upper body from rotating out. They're bracing. So a couple different woodpeckers. Oh, that's a wood creeper, montane wood creeper. Swimming birds, a wide variety of birds swim with webbing on their front toes. Another adaptation is to increase surface area with lobed toes. So this is like a grebe's toes over here on the left, and then the webbed toes that you might see on a goose or a duck. Beaks. Birds are not the only organisms with beaks. Turtles and various dinosaurs possessed beaks. However, birds have tremendous diversity in their beaks. The beak is used for handling food, and the size and shape of that beak is what determines what they can eat. So they are kind of limited in their diet based on what their beak is shaped like. Here's some examples. Great blue heron for spearing, jabbing fish. The curlew has a sickle, probes in the sand for its food. Hawks have a hooked bill for tearing flesh. The merganser has a kind of flat duck-like bill for sieving water. Cardinal has a beak that's great for cracking seeds. The spoonbill kind of swings its head back and forth in the water, using its bill to find food. The flicker has a chisel bill, like all the woodpeckers do, to dig insects out of the wood. Brown pelican has a huge bill. It will scoop up water with prey fish inside of it and basically capture a bunch of that water with their prey inside of it. Crows have a general purpose bill. They're kind of the jack of all trades when it comes to birds. They are omnivores. They will eat pretty much anything, which ironically makes them a lot like us. And probably one of the reasons that we don't like them. They kind of reflect some of our behavior as being able to survive in pretty much any conditions. They're good at trailing us and taking advantage of our situation. And I think that's probably a lot of the reason that people suspect that ravens and crows are harbingers of bad news. Finches have short, deep bills, ideal for opening seeds. House finch. Crossbills have kind of a weird beak. They cross over. The upper and lower mandibles cross over. This happens to be really good for getting into a pine cone. If you've ever tried to pull the sides off a pine cone, you can get yourself stuck. They put their beak inside there, and they can kind of twist it open. Warblers have forceps-like bills, like pliers, little mini pliers. They can eat soft-bodied insects. They have feathers. If you look at the little feathers around their beak, that keeps those insects that are moving around on the beak from getting up into their face and near their eyes. Dabbling ducks, mallards, have beaks that are good for straining water. Mergansers have beaks that are serrated and help grasp fish. Notice all these teeth on this beak. If they grab a fish and the fish tries to get off the teeth, the only way off is to go further down the throat.